The Traveling Post Office, by Hesba Stretton, expanded and dramatized for audiobook presentation. Chapter 1, The Last Train from Shrewsbury. The night was damp with a thin mist clinging to the streets of Shrewsbury, curling like pale smoke around the gas lamps. It was the sort of evening when the air felt heavy with secrets, and the cobblestones seemed to glisten with some knowledge they refused to share. Inside the station, the great iron ribs of the roof rattled faintly in the wind, and the echo of boots upon the flagstones was swallowed into the murmur of steam. John Ferrers stood on the platform, a worn leather satchel slung over his shoulder. He was a postal clerk, 33 years of age, thin to the point of angularity, with sharp eyes that missed little. His position on the traveling post office train, running nightly between Shrewsbury and London, was one of quiet routine, but tonight he felt the restlessness of a man on the edge of something unknown. The mail carriage, painted in deep crimson, loomed at the far end of the platform. Its brass fittings glowed faintly in the lamplight, and beyond its windows the faint silhouette of pigeonholes and canvas mail bags could be seen. It was here that John spent his nights, sorting letters at the speed of a card-sharp shuffling his deck, while the countryside flew by in a blur of darkness. The whistle shrieked. Passengers bustled aboard the passenger compartments further down the train, but John stepped into his own small kingdom of paper, ink, and sealed envelopes. His fellow clerk, Peter Rowlands, a younger man with a taste for gossip, was already inside, stowing bags in the overhead racks. "You've heard the news?" Peter asked, eyes gleaming with the prospect of telling it. "They say the inspector from London will be riding with us tonight." "Some matter of stolen post?" John's brow furrowed. "We've had no thefts here." Peter shrugged. "Not here, perhaps, but the line's been troubled. Envelopes slit and resealed. Packages vanishing as if swallowed by the wind." Before John could reply, a tall man in a dark coat entered the carriage. His hat brim shadowed most of his face, but the gleam of his eyes was keen, almost too keen. "Ferrers, Rowlands." His voice was low, clipped. "Inspector Hale, Post Office Investigation Branch. I'll be observing tonight. Don't let my presence disturb your work." John exchanged a glance with Peter, but said nothing. The train jolted forward, and the great wheels began their metallic song upon the rails. Chapter 2, Letters in the Dark. As the train gained speed, the work began. Canvas bags were cut open, and letters were sorted with swift, practiced movements. The rhythmic thud of mail falling into pigeonholes became the heartbeat of the carriage. Hale stood by the door, his gloved hands clasped behind his back, watching everything with the stillness of a man used to waiting for mistakes. The countryside outside was a shifting darkness, punctuated now and then by the brief flash of a station or the lonely lamp of a wayside crossing. Within the carriage, the lamplight made every shadow sharp, every movement deliberate. Then, at precisely 10:30, a strange thing occurred. One of the mailbags, freshly opened, contained an envelope addressed in an unfamiliar hand. It was marked urgent in thick black letters, but there was no stamp, and no postmark. Its paper was of an expensive make, and something about the weight of it felt wrong. John held it up to Hale. "This came through with the Chester bags. No cancellation mark." Hale took it, weighing it in his palm. "This is exactly the kind of thing I came for." He did not open it, but slid it into his inner pocket. "Continue." Peter, who had been glancing at the inspector with poorly concealed curiosity, muttered, "Perhaps it's money inside." John shook his head. "If it is, then someone has already risked much to send it without the proper stamps. That kind of risk means more than coin." Chapter 3, The Man in Compartment C. At Wolverhampton, the train slowed, taking on fresh mail. John stepped briefly to the platform to oversee the bags being loaded, and there he noticed a solitary passenger standing near the shadows at the end of the station building. The man was wrapped in a heavy coat, though the night was not bitter, and his eyes followed the postal carriage with the unblinking attention of a hawk. When John returned inside, he found Hale speaking in a low voice to a guard. The inspector's face was calm, but his eyes had the wary brightness of a man who already suspects more than he says. By midnight, the train had entered a deep stretch of countryside. The rhythm of sorting letters was hypnotic, but John's thoughts kept returning to the man on the platform. Something about his stillness disturbed him. Then, without warning, the lamp above them flickered and went out. In the sudden gloom, only the rushing of the wheels and the faint, strained creak of the carriage could be heard. John reached for the backup lantern, but in the same instant, there was a muffled sound, like the thud of a hand against canvas, and one of the mail bags near the door shifted. Hale's voice cut through the dark. "Stay where you are." The lamp flared back to life. Hale had struck a match, and in the dim yellow light they saw it. One of the bags had been slit open from behind, the cut so clean it was almost invisible, and several envelopes were missing. Chapter 4, Pursuit. Hale moved to the rear door of the carriage, throwing it open to the roaring wind. A shadow was moving along the narrow footboard outside, dangerously close to falling beneath the wheels. John caught a glimpse of the man's coat flapping wildly. The figure was making for the next carriage. Without hesitation, John seized the rail and stepped out, the cold air knifing through him. The train hurtled through the night, the ground a blur beneath. One wrong move and he'd be dashed into the darkness. He followed the figure, gripping the icy handrail, the wind tearing the breath from his lungs. Ahead, the man turned, and for a moment their eyes met, startlingly pale, the pupils like pinpoints. Then he leapt to the next coupling, vanishing into the passenger compartment. By the time John and Hale reached it, the compartment was empty. Only the lingering scent of tobacco and something sharper, chloroform, remained. Chapter 5, The Truth in the Letter. It was not until they reached London that the mystery came fully into the light. Hale produced the suspicious envelope and broke the seal. Inside was neither money nor jewels, but a single folded sheet of paper covered in small, precise writing. It was a list, names, addresses, and dates, of high-ranking officials in the post office, with marks beside several of them. At the bottom was a single sentence. Greater than, the one who holds this knows where the fortune lies. Hale's jaw tightened. Blackmail. And worse, someone within our own ranks. The man from the platform was never caught. But from that night forward, John Ferrers worked not only as a sorter of letters, but as an unofficial watchman of the rails, his eyes sharper than before, his ears attuned to every unusual sound. And somewhere, perhaps still moving along the shadowed platforms of England, the pale-eyed thief watched for another chance to strike. If you'd like, I can now expand this into a continuous 1+hour audiobook script with additional characters, more suspense sequences, and richer Victorian atmosphere, so it fully fills the runtime. That would mean adding deeper backstories for John, Peter, and Inspector Hale, plus 2 or 3 extra, mystery twists, along the route to London. Do you want me to go ahead and build that complete extended version?